So what are the most common misconceptions with ADHD? Well, that's what today's video is all about. If you guys are new here, hi, my name is Jess. I'm a person in long-term recovery who has served time in prison and who has recently gotten a new mental health diagnosis. I just filmed that video. If you want to follow me on any other social media platform, TikTok, Instagram, Patreon, that's $2. It's only ever gonna be $2. All of that is linked down below, as well as my podcast and my vlog channel. Please go freaking subscribe to that. It really helps. Really helps. I'm also a proud partner with Groups Recover Together. They are a both online and in-person treatment program. They strongly lean on harm reduction. They are 420 friendly, and they're just an amazing team of people that helps you from start to finish in your recovery. Whether that is maybe you need clothes or housing or a driver's license, whatever the problem is, they will work their absolute hardest to find a solution for you, because long-term recovery is very difficult when we're trying to rebuild our lives. You can find my landing page with Groups in the description box of this video. All right, let's kick this thing off. So I was recently diagnosed with ADHD and I'm 32 years old. So how the heck have I gone this long and not known that it's ADHD? Well, that's actually really common and we're gonna get into that. But number one, the first common misconception that I would like to talk about is that everyone has ADHD. While we might all struggle at times with staying on task, or we might become distracted, or we might have moments, little pockets of being super hyper, that doesn't mean that everyone has ADHD. But ADHD is really common with almost 3 million new cases per year. And we're gonna get into the reason why there are so many new cases of ADHD. So it is very common, but not everyone has it. So to say everyone has ADHD makes absolutely no sense, just because everyone struggles at times with staying on task and not getting distracted. So to say everyone has ADHD just because you have moments where you're distracted would be like saying everyone has depression when everyone has experienced moments of sadness or moments of worry or concern or anxiety. Number two, ADHD isn't real. ADHD is actually one of the most well-researched mental disorders out there. Because of all the research we have on ADHD, we know that it is a serious neurodevelopment condition. There are a lot of reasons why people think that ADHD isn't real. A lot of this comes from the media or TV shows or family or friends saying, you don't really have ADHD, or you seem fine, or just get over it. And the problem is we can't just get over ADHD. You have to keep in mind, with so many mental health issues, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not real. And just because I might seem fine doesn't mean that I don't have ADHD. It's also important to note that ADHD presents differently in everyone. It presents differently in men and women. It presents differently in children and adults, but we'll get into that. Number three, it's really easy to get diagnosed ADHD. Well, that's not exactly true. So there is diagnostic criteria that you have to meet. They have to look at all of these symptoms that you have, and they have to determine the severity of them and how often all of these symptoms are chronically affecting your life. A lot of people don't want to get diagnosed because of the guilt and the shame and the misconceptions surrounding ADHD. And even if you don't think you want to go the route of medication, it's okay. I think it still is important to get diagnosed and to learn about ADHD and how it affects our lives holistically, because ADHD affects so many different areas in our life, and I don't think people really understand that. People often think that ADHD means you're super hyper, bouncing off the walls, or you just can't focus and you can just like get over that. That's not exactly true. ADHD affects our emotional regulation. ADHD affects so many areas of our lives, like our relationship, our work, our home life, and even our physical health. Number four, stimulant medication is the same as meth. No. People often think that you should only be taking medication if you've tried everything else under the sun, like yoga and diet changes and exercise and essential oils and meditation and breathing techniques and all these things, right? I don't agree with that. Yes, doing all of the right things for your body can be amazing to your mental health, and we shouldn't discredit that. You should be taking care of your body. You should be eating right and drinking a lot of water and exercising and doing all of these things, right? You should. That's definitely going to help your life. But there is no reason why we should be exhausted trying to do all of these things to balance our mental health so that we don't have to take medication. And the reason why people think that is because there is such a stigma surrounding medication that people think that medication should only be your last resort. Medication doesn't have to be someone's last resort. And all of the things I just mentioned, like eating a good diet and exercising and doing meditation or doing yoga, or all of those things, self-care, all of those things are very difficult when you can't manage what is going on inside of your brain. So while there is no cure for ADHD, medication for ADHD helps us have better control over our mind so that we can improve all of the areas of our lives. Medication is not going to replace the skills needed to function healthily and happily in our ADHD mind, but it's going to help. You should always be informed before taking a new medication. You should know all of your options. Some are stimulant, some are non-stimulant. So do your research and obviously make sure that this is the right decision for you and be informed. However, don't completely disregard taking medication when you might need it. Now, some people can manage their ADHD without medication, and some people need medication. We're all different. We're all on a different spectrum. So if you have ADHD and you don't take medication, try not to tell others that they don't need it because they can manage it if you can. We're all different. We all have different severity levels of ADHD, and what works for one person might not work for the other. Just on that topic, I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I had an addiction to methamphetamine. Well, the underlying cause of my addiction, my substance use disorder, was mental health issues. And often long-term success in recovery means finding out and figuring out what those underlying causes are. And I have found out what my underlying cause of substance use disorder is: mental health. And as I have learned more and more about who I am and how my brain works, I've been able to better manage my mental health. So my diagnoses are PTSD, depression, insomnia, anxiety. However, the insomnia, anxiety, and depression can fall up under ADHD. Symptoms of ADHD can be those things. And as I learned more about how my brain works in particular, I realized that those other diagnoses were not the full picture. They were a piece of the puzzle, and now the full picture is ADHD. So what medication is going to do is medication is going to increase the dopamine levels in your mind, and it's going to help your neurons communicate better so that you can focus better and so that you can improve other areas of your life. So I can't learn coping mechanisms and skills for functioning in ADHD if my brain cannot center in on that. So medication is a tool to help, not a cure. So while I can take medication that is going to help treat ADHD, I still have to be working on the skills that I need in my daily life to have a healthy, balanced life in my professional life and my personal life. Number 5, stimulant medication is addictive. When stimulant medication is used properly for the right diagnosis and under the care of medical professionals, the risk of habit forming or addiction to that medicine is low. It's always a good idea to be informed on the medication that you are taking and the risks of taking certain medication. Taking a stimulant medication does not mean that you're going to become addicted on it. That's not what that means. And all of the fear surrounding stimulant medication and all of the stigma surrounding it really harms those that actually need this medication. I think so often if things are parroted enough, like said over and over and over again, people just believe them blindly without actually doing the research on it. Stimulant medication is not a crutch or an excuse to get high. We need to stop that rhetoric because it really is harming those that need it. Like I just said, the stigma is so real surrounding ADHD and medication that even though I posted a video announcing my new diagnosis, I never actually said what medications I'm taking, and yet I got so many comments telling me to switch medications and not take Adderall. Well, I didn't say that word. I didn't say that that's what I was taking. I never mentioned it at all. But the stigma surrounding the diagnosis and the stigma surrounding the medication that helps manage the diagnosis of ADHD is so unbelievably real that even though people didn't hear what medication I'm taking, and I'm probably never going to say it, they just assumed that it was one drug and they assumed that I could potentially abuse it or that it was dangerous. And that's just from false information being spread so often. And yes, I understand that there have been people that have abused it. I know, I get it. And there are people that were put on a certain stimulant medication and it didn't work, so they switched to a different one. But there are both stimulant and non-stimulant medications to treat ADHD, and we kind of just have to figure out what works best for us. So what worked for you might not work for me, and vice versa. But please stop spreading false information that stimulant medication is dangerous, habit forming, and that people in recovery from substance use disorder can't take stimulant medication because then it means they're not in recovery. That's awful. Stop saying that. We have to treat the underlying cause of substance use disorder, and that is often treating mental health. Number 6, boys have it and girls don't. I received this one quite a bit. That's actually not true, even though boys are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed than girls. Why is that? Well, it's because ADHD presents differently in men and women. A lot of times in boys, they are hyperactive and they lean more towards that side where they're hyperactive and they can't sit still, and you can visibly see that they are struggling with ADHD. And in girls, it presents differently, so it doesn't look like we have it, because a lot of times that hyperactivity is actually going on inside of our minds and you can't see it. But just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not real. And even though we've done so much more research on ADHD, women still go misdiagnosed so often. And this can be especially hard when, say, you have a dual diagnosis. So I have a diagnosis of PTSD and depression. Well, now I have ADHD and we have kind of found out why I was having the other symptoms, right? But this can go unnoticed for so long. And guys, most likely, are outwardly hyper. Well, it's just so loud in our heads as a woman with ADHD. Our mind has a hard time turning off, and that hyperactivity is still going on. We just can't see it. So often young boys, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, they are brought in a lot sooner because the symptoms are very obvious to parents. Before we go on to the other myths, I do want to say that if you have a child with ADHD and the doctors are recommending medication, don't let outside people shame you into not putting your child on medication if they need it. To deny your child medication for a mental health issue would be like denying them glasses when they can't see. And that is obviously going to be a very difficult decision for you and your child and your family. Make that decision with informed medical professionals and not people that don't really understand it. Number 7, only kids have ADHD and you can outgrow it. Well, no. So ADHD is hereditary and it presents in children, mostly boys, right? Because we see it easier, but it's not just in children. And there's no cure for ADHD. Adults absolutely have ADHD, and it probably was presenting itself in childhood and early adulthood. Even if you went undiagnosed or misdiagnosed for a really long time, it's still there because there's no cure. The reason why people think that adults don't have ADHD is because we've learned coping mechanisms to present ourselves okay to the world. So we might look okay, but that doesn't mean that there isn't just a freaking mess going on inside of our heads. Number 8, people with ADHD aren't smart. No, there's no correlation between low IQ and ADHD. In fact, fun fact for you, people with ADHD are at an increased likelihood to be entrepreneurs. Ta-da! Me. That is in large part due to the fact that our society doesn't really work for us, meaning that I couldn't go into the office and tell my boss, I'm sorry I can't work today because I'm not hyper-focused today and I just can't sit at my desk. That's why school is so hard. I didn't graduate high school and everyone told me I had a lot of potential, but I wasn't getting done. Well, because I couldn't. I couldn't focus on it. It wasn't just that I couldn't focus on it, it was almost painful for me to sit at a desk and read a test. So I would get like a few questions into the test or even halfway through a test, and then my brain couldn't handle it anymore, and it was almost physically painful for me to sit there and read the questions and concentrate on a test. But back in my day, when I was in school, people just saw that as I'm a test taker, and no one recognized, wait, you got half of these answers pretty much correct in the first part of the test, but you couldn't do the rest of the test. No one noticed it. And I went so long. I'm 32 and I just got my diagnosis. This went untreated for so long. So if you search here on YouTube, you're probably going to find a bunch of videos that are labeled like ADHD is my superpower. And I think that's really cool because we are able to harness creativity and increase profitability. So a lot of times people in ADHD, they'll see this new project and they get hyper focused on it, and we'll also figure out a way to monetize that. And that could look like starting a business or a YouTube channel or a merch line or podcast or what have you. And we get really focused on that and excited about that. And that's all we want to do. It's our new obsession until it's not, right? So there are definitely pros and cons to having ADHD. And while some people might think it's a superpower, and I'm not quite there yet because it's a lot for me to handle at this moment in time, I do see all of the amazing characteristics within it, and if harnessed correctly, it can be an amazing gift. With that being said, not everyone has the ability to harness that creativity and create, their own business, and a lot of people with ADHD struggle, and even after they've created a business, they still struggle. ADHD is a very difficult thing to manage. Number 9, if you have ADHD, you can't focus at all or ever. Nope. Thank God. So we have moments of hyperactivity. So we have moments of hyper focus, like I just said. And This for me in particular just looks like there are days where I'll film 4 YouTube videos and then I can't film for like 2 weeks, and that's like a really normal thing in my life. So I get really hyper focused and I get all of these ideas and I get super creative and I focus on that for a while and then it dies. It's like I have to follow the dopamine to get something done, you know? So I'm like, oh my God, today's the day where I have some dopamine? Cool, thank you, bruh. And I will follow down that path and I will be really excited about it until I'm not. So that's hard to balance, and that's why work life for people with ADHD is very difficult if they have to work in an office or they can't be entrepreneurs who create their own schedule. So I'm very blessed in that I can create my own schedule, and I think that's another reason why this has gone unnoticed for so long, because I have been able to create my own schedule since 2000, oh my God, 16, when I was getting my bachelor's degree. That doesn't sound like you can create your own schedule, but I was getting my bachelor's degree online and I had 2 small babies at the house, a 4-year-old and a newborn. And what I would do to get through my classes is I would wait until the last freaking second and then type 90 words a minute and do everything in a deadline-induced panic. I don't know how I graduated with my bachelor's degree. And number 10, that ADHD is all about hyperactivity. And if you're not hyper, then you don't have ADHD. Incorrect. Hyperactivity can be external or it can be internal. For me, it's internal. Even with my anxiety symptoms, it is internal. So if I'm on a plane, which exacerbates my symptoms, if I'm on a plane and you're sitting next to me, you're probably not gonna know that I am high anxiety and I'm nervous, because I hold everything in and I've created these coping mechanisms and I don't know, it's so internal for me. So strangers won't notice that I am really struggling and I am terrified and I wanna get off of the plane because I'm just sitting there listening to music and it looks like I'm okay, but inside I'm freaking screaming. A huge part of my ADHD is all in here, and it's just exhausting at times. So please know that just because you can't see a mental health issue doesn't mean it's not real. Not all disabilities are visible, but that doesn't mean that they're fake. Also, yes, I'm in long-term recovery. And no, if I take stimulant medication, that does not mean I am cheating my recovery. It means I am treating my mental health, which was the root cause of my substance use disorder. At the end of the day, we are all human beings trying to live our best lives. And if you've seen someone struggle with addiction and then they get a diagnosis that you don't really understand, instead of judging them or telling them that they are not in recovery, just educate yourself and research it before you pass judgment or stigma. Stigma is a very real and dangerous part of our society, and it's why people have such a hard time reaching out for help when they're struggling with substance use disorder. It's the shame and the stigma and the guilt, and there shouldn't be any shame taking medication for your mental health. Our mental health is physical health because our head, our brain is attached to our body. So mental health is physical health. It's so important. If I broke my arm, you wouldn't be like,
oh my God, Jess. A cast? Really? Don't you think you're being dramatic with that cast? Who gave you that cast? You don't need that. Stop making excuses for your broken arm.
of course you wouldn't say that to me. You'd be like, how the do you do that when you get the cast off? And it would just be like a casual conversation. No one would ever say I didn't need a cast for a broken arm. So don't say that I don't need medication for my ADHD just because you know someone that treats it without medicine, or maybe you treat it without medicine. We're all different and our brains are doing different things. And if I have found something that has helped me manage my symptoms of ADHD, then that should be celebrated, or at least not talked down about. As I share this more online, I have seen that ADHD often gets gaslit. And what I mean by that is people say, oh, that's not real. Everyone has ADHD. This is just a crutch. You're making excuses. You just want to get high. Stimulant medication is like meth. You're cheating your recovery. Stop gaslighting mental health issues and recognize the importance of learning about our mental health and treating it. We need to normalize taking care of ourselves. Mental health is physical health, and the two should not be differentiated, and they shouldn't be talked down about because they're very serious. I'm gonna end today's video here. As always, I love you guys. Stay safe, stay in recovery, whatever that looks like to you, because there is no wrong way to recover. And don't let people that are not your doctor tell you that you don't need medication. I'll see you guys in the next one.